Hi everyone, and welcome to our first video on essay writing. One of the things that I want to emphasize is that you can come and see us with your writing. So once you've tried to apply these tips to your pieces of writing for your essay, do come and see us for appointments. We offer Zoom appointments where we will read your work in advance and give you feedback on it during the appointment. So for your essay, you're being asked to do a risk assessment. But what makes an effective essay for a risk assessment piece? One of the main things that I want to emphasize is that it has to have a clear line of argument. So you've got a head start in terms of the things that you need to analyze. So Aparna has given you the outline of here is the framework to use. But using that framework, it has to have a clear, logical progression from A to B to be able to say why overall you think that the risk can be characterized in the way that you've chosen. So it has to have a clear, logical progression of ideas to develop that risk assessment. So every piece of information that you use has to be relevant to your argument, and it has to have strong evidence to demonstrate that you've done wide and critical reading, because this is based on your literature review. This is based on your analysis of the literature to be able to characterize, is that risk major, minor, moderate? What is the overall characterization that you were making? Now, one of the problems that you might find with this assignment is that the evidence won't always be available. It won't always be easy to find, and it won't always be exactly what you need. So, say for instance, you're looking at a particular disease in one country, but the sources are looking at actually the disease is in another country. But you want to make some kind of a comparison between, say for instance, sandflies in one country and sandflies in another, or ticks in one country and how climate change has affected those, and ticks in another country and how climate change is going to affect those. So what you sometimes might need to do is have a think about the sources that you are coming across. How are they relevant? And if they aren't relevant, if they're not directly related to your particular focus, you have to consider a few things. A, are there more relevant sources? So are there just some other sources out there that you just haven't found yet? In that case, try and search using different terms, try and put in more specific terms, or try and broaden them if you've already used quite specific terms. But if that's not the case, if the only literature that you found is the stuff on other countries or other related diseases, then you've got to explain why those are still the best sources to use for your particular risk that you're looking at. So, say for instance, you're using data from another country, you've got to explain why that data from another country is still relevant to the location that you're focusing on. So, do consult with Aparna, do ask her about whether there are sources out there that you just haven't come across yet, and do get in touch with the library staff. They can help you to find sources as well. There are librarian staff for different disciplines, so get in touch with the science librarian. Now we're going to start talking about finding your argument. Now, finding your argument will take you through a few different stages. You'll be first of all understanding what the question is, doing some research, and from that research developing your reasons for your answer. And you have to come up with a thesis statement. You have to come up with your risk assessment. What is your characterization of the risk? That's the ultimate goal of this assessment piece. So let's have a look at how that's carried through. So, throughout your piece of writing, you have to demonstrate your key message. Your key message is really important to tie that argument together. So, in this example, what we have here is a thesis statement which argues that the harmful impacts of climate change will influence tick-borne encephalitis. So, climate change is going to contribute to factors that lead to more harmful examples of tick-borne encephalitis. And following that same essay, straight to the conclusion, you will also see the same key message reiterated. The risk assessment in this paper has illustrated that the associated risk climate change poses to tick-borne encephalitis incidence in Sweden. So, at the end, what they're saying is that due to these predictions, the tick-borne encephalitis must become a public health priority. In another example, one that looks at a coal power plant in Bangladesh, what they're arguing is the existing impact assessment that has been done in the past is not adequate. It has not regulated the power plant effectively. So what they're arguing there is that the risk assessment with this particular power plant is actually quite strong. It's actually quite harmful. So they were arguing in this introduction that emissions and waste from coal plants can have harmful effects on human health. So we already have a sense from the introduction of what your argument is going to be. Then in the conclusion, they go into a little bit more detail. So they are wrapping up in here in the conclusion what the key factors were in the risk assessment that they've looked at, and in the end they're saying that the standards in terms of the coal power plant need to be reviewed. So there needs to be further context-specific research. So this was a case where the student found that the resources that they had available to them didn't always give enough information. So that's why they're saying it's difficult to come to a valid conclusion given the lack of context-specific data, so there wasn't that data available. But given the other sources that they looked at, given the relevant literature that they looked at, there is a perceived risk to human health. So it needs to be researched in more depth. So their argument is that this still needs to be reviewed. So in planning your essay, have a think about your thesis statement early on. Even if you still need to do more research, do have a think about what your argument is going to be and come up with a thesis statement. It's really useful to actually write down your thesis statement before you've actually written the rest of the essay, because it helps to guide you as you write. So keep thinking about what is your thesis statement as you read through the sources. As you're going through the sources, try and work out what kind of assessment is this leading me towards. Okay, so our next video is going to be about structuring your assignment.